1977, George Lucas formed a legacy.
The Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
Inspired by mythology, his saga has become a passion for many.
Feel the Force around you.
His legend has become our story.
It's true. All of it.
One of resistance,
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
rebellion,
Rebellion is built on hope.
and redemption.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
This is Star Wars Reactions.
Remember, the Force will be with you. Always.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 80 of Star Wars Reactions. We got an awesome show for you today. This is going to be another chapter in our Vintage Reaction series, and we are going to have a blast. So let's get the introductions out of the way so we can get this show going. My name is Aaron Harris, and joining me is the Cody to my Rex, the David Motters. David, brother, how you doing tonight?
I am doing good. Recording with you. Looking forward to doing another Vintage Reactions, and got a part 2 to the coverage of psychopathy in my psychology corner. So ready to go.
Awesome. It's going to be a great show. I am officially dubbing this our Carabas show because we've already had the biggest Carabas moment in our show's history. This is actually our second recording of this episode. We recorded it. It didn't record. Well, it recorded, but the recording didn't work. So we're having a Carabas moment. So
Yeah, we'll just do it again and hope it records.
we're roll with the punches, you know. So episode 80, take 2. So let's just jump right into it. We got a great episode. Like I said, we're doing Vintage Reactions this week. The 5th episode, right, of Ewoks?
I believe so.
At least the 5th episode of the Ewoks show from the 1980s. This episode is entitled The Travelling Jindas, released October 5th of 1985, written by Bob Carew, directed by Raymond Jaffles. This episode, of course, is about Latara, who is wanting to play music on her flute, but has to have her chores done, and she has to babysit first. And of course, she doesn't like this. But on the flip side, King Gornesh needs a babysitter. And of course, King Gornesh is the Dulok's king. And so he sends out 2 Duloks named X and O to go find a babysitter. In the meantime, the Great Bondo and the Travelling Jindas arrive at Bright Tree Village. Latara sees an opportunity to be a part of their entertainment troupe. Nisa and Wicket see Latara off as she secretly runs away to join the Travelling Jindas. Well, of course, the Duloks are following the Jindas, and they see an Ewok that they could use to get to suffice as their babysitter. So they kidnap her and take her away. Meanwhile, they discover her missing. So Logret gives our heroes, which in this case is Wicket, Nisa, Tebow, and Whittle, a magic amulet in the form of a magical seed that they can't get wet. Latara ends up becoming homesick while she's away with the Jindas, and discovers that there's no way for her to get home because the Jindas are wandering gypsies who are always lost. And not only are they lost, they don't know where they're going. Latara is, of course, kidnapped and taken to the Dulok village, where she has to babysit the baby Dulok brats. The Travelling Jindas team up with the Ewoks, and they come to the Dulok village to rescue Latara. And of course, Latara ends the episode learning that fame isn't easy and that the grass is not always greener on the other side. David, why don't you kick us off with your initial reactions?
Yeah, consistent with what we've seen in previous episodes, this has a good moral lesson. And so you heard Aaron hint at it. It speaks to the grass not always being greener on the other side. There's also another lesson, and it's really delay of gratification. That's a tough one, right? And we see Latara's parents tell her that she does need to do her chores and to babysit first. And I made the point in our show notes to say that even if it was the case that she didn't want to play music, that she needs to get those done first, and that is a really good lesson to learn. Finishing up work first, and then have fun later. So a really good episode, and I really like these moral lessons.
Excellent. Well said. And I agree with you, man. This was a fun episode. I really enjoyed it. It honestly reminded me a lot of the old stories, TV shows, even of movies where kids would run away and join the circus to an attempt to get a better life. And it doesn't always work out for them in the end. And in this case is essentially what happens. There's a good moral story to it. Latara learns that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I love it. And I think what I love the best out of this is the song Latara plays toward the end of the episode for the Dulocs when they're trying to, buy time while she's being rescued, is essentially the same background music for the Ewoks that we hear in every episode. So original. I love it. Of course, the Dulocs are back. They're always good for a laugh. And the Jindas, they're awesome. Great role. They come across initially as con artists, but they're really just, some happy-go-lucky wanderers that, have nowhere to go and all the time in the world to get there. So they're fun. I really, really enjoyed it. And I got to say, it's probably my favorite episode of the Ewoks so far.
Good.
So loved it. So let's just jump into our talking points here. And our first point and our second point, they kind of tie in together, let's say, because they're just pretty much combine everything, because it's basically we want to talk about Latara wanting to leave and be able to play her music and be an entertainer like so many of us and so many kids and a lot of adults wanted to do growing up, and how things don't always work out and things are not always greener on the other side. And I think that's something that is a universal lesson that needs to be taught and even remembered by adults too, on both sides. Kids need to learn it, adults need to remember it, and if adults didn't learn it as kids, they need to learn it, because things aren't always greener. We always wish for, well, if I only had this, things would be better. If I had a different boss, life would be so much easier. And it's not always that way. It's a crazy situation we see Latara in, but it's a good lesson. What are your thoughts, David, on Latara's want to leave and the lesson learned?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of persons, 50 and under. I've worked with mostly people 50 and up now, but when you work with young kids, like Aaron said, this is a big lesson that we want them to learn, so that later on it isn't the case that they're sitting there and they're like, you know what? If only I had a different boss. If only I had a better looking wife, or if I had a better looking husband, or if I had a wife who made more money, or a husband who made more money. That whole thing of the grass is greener. As Aaron said, he being a good psychologist tonight, it's always better to get these things under our belt and learn them when we're kids and teenagers, so that we can apply them in adulthood. Now, it doesn't mean that if we learn them in childhood and adolescence that we'll necessarily apply them in adulthood, but that's the time to learn it, and it's a wonderful lesson to learn. And it's nice to see that in this episode, and she does learn it, but ends up learning it in a way that isn't too harmful to her or her family. So that works out pretty good.
Absolutely. And another thing that's not even in our show notes that I was just thinking about too, and it could be because we recorded this episode before and it didn't take, that got me thinking about it because we've had these conversations before, is she's also learning about responsibility too. She has these responsibilities. She has these chores that she has to do. She doesn't want to do them, even though they are her responsibility. And when she does run away, and she just does join the Jindas, she's not getting to do what she wants to do. She's given a whole new set of responsibilities with, being their person that cleans up, being their, essentially being their laborer. There's, at one point, I think the Great Bondo even says she is their assistant. It is basically she's running and getting the coffee, she's doing the laundry, she's cleaning the caravan. She's doing everything that she had to do at the Ewok village, but she's doing it for less grateful people. And so she's learning that responsibility is something that you're going to have to deal with wherever you go as well.
Well said.
So, but it was very interesting to see these lessons being portrayed. And of course, we had a lot of comedic elements through this episode. What did you? I got to know. What did you think of X and O, the Duloc sent to find the babysitter?
These guys are a trip. They're perfect comedy relief. You got to have, my dad would always call these kind of characters frickin' frack, and they're always doing something to portray the bad guys, but not too serious of bad guys. But they were fun. They played their role perfectly. What did you think?
I thought they were hysterical. They honestly reminded me of the 60s Batman episodes with Burt Ward and Adam West. How the Joker and Catwoman or the Riddler or Penguin, they always had these henchmen that would always had these random names like Henchman 1, Henchman 2, or for the Joker they'd be like Ace and Club and just random names.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they would be the ones that would be like you would have a smart one, you'd have a dumb one, you'd have a strong one, and they'd all try to beat up on Batman and Robin and end up getting beat up by Batman and Robin. The pow, bam, zap, zoinkas.
Grew up on that. I grew up on that.
Yeah, so did I. I loved watching that show. But X and O reminded me of those type of henchmen, and it was a lot of fun to enjoy.
Yeah,
they brought a comedic element to it that we got to see, and which I enjoyed. It. We got a lot of comedy in this, comedic elements, like the scene when they arrive at when the Jindas arrive at the Duloc village and they start doing their show, and the first performer comes out and has all those little creatures on there doing tricks, and one of the Dulocs is like, "That's my dinner," and he hops up on stage, and all of a sudden all the animals are like, "Roar!" Right. And he goes falling off, and all the Dulocs are laughing at him. It's just little things like that kept it silly, kept it kid friendly and enjoyable, but still contributed to the overall lesson and moral being taught.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, not too scary. Yeah, young kids can laugh, and that physical comedy can really keep the kids laughing.
No, that it can. Let's talk about the Jindas for a minute, because of course they're essentially the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey circus of Endor. It appears, because they say at the beginning of the episode that they travel all around Endor, bringing entertainment and fun to the different towns, which, apparently there are a bunch of towns on Endor, which we never got to see, that need entertaining. And the Jindas do that randomly. And all they ask for is a place to rest for a night in return. And like I said in my opening thoughts, when I first started watching them and they showed up, I was sitting there thinking, great, we got scam artists that are going to try to scam and scam the Ewoks or even steal from the Ewoks. And it was going to be an episode about recovering something from the Ewoks or from the Jindas for the Ewoks. And little did I think it would be recovering a runaway Ewok. What were your thoughts on the Jindas themselves?
Well, I got a kick out of them, in particular, the great Bondo. I did mention to you earlier that even before we were recording, I thought, what a great Star Wars trivia question. They could be a little bit more difficult than a lot of Star Wars trivia questions, which is, can you name the ringmaster, the head person of the Travelling Jindas from the 1985 Star Wars Ewoks animated cartoon? And I'll be curious to see how many get the great Bondo. And talking about comedy relief that Aaron was mentioning, I got a kick out of him talking to Latara about how, what do you say? Not only are we lost, but we don't even know where we are. And I loved how, he said that. She kind of looked at him, and but he's a good little character, and all of the traveling crew with him are fun, and like I mentioned to you earlier, I guess they must have been hunkered down during the Battle of Endor, because there's a lot of different characters we see here in this show that we don't see on Endor, but understandably so. But my headcanon is they were hiding out, hunkered down while the Ewoks took care of business.
Yeah, they were probably wandering the other side of the planet.
At that time, yes.
Yeah, they were on the other side of the planet entertaining the Dulocs on a walkabout.
That's right.
Which is why we saw none of them during the Battle of Endor. Oh, Lord. Hilarious. Yeah, the Great Bondo, of course, was a great character. He was fun. He fit the look and description of, I would say, like a ringmaster of a circus, which is essentially what he was. The promoter, the hype man, the guy at center ring. And I was thinking too, looking at the time period that this show was being made, in the mid 80s, Great Bondo sounds a lot like the Great Gonzo. And it makes me curious if there's any little inspiration there from the Muppets.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. All those creatives, they really do look at each other's stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, especially Disney has or not Disney, but Star Wars has a tendency of giving nods to stuff they like with the Lost Ark being in episodes of Clone Wars and stuff like that. Just those little nods that make a difference out of as a show of respect. So I could definitely see. I could definitely understand if there was. Of course, it could just be a coincidence as well. But if y'all know, y'all have to let us know, because I'm going to be doing some additional research on that to see if there's a connection. But if you already know, let me know. Let us know, either online, through our social media accounts, or email us. We would love to find out.
Yeah.
If there is any connection whatsoever. I'm curious, and this is completely off base of where the conversation was going. But, I was thinking we need to get Jason Fry to write like an episode guide for like Ewoks and droids, and that's what needs to be done.
Yeah.
All the give you the background and the trivia and the breakdown. That would be cool. They need to get one of those done.
Yeah,
for,
two seasons. Yeah. Talk about the moral, maybe little like you said, trivia, behind the scenes tidbits that he's done in the episode guide for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, like where is and who knows? Maybe we'd finally get an answer of where were these people during the Battle of Endor.
Well, they come up with something, right? They come up with something. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they would. I would love to hear what they come up with. So, and don't give me the line. It's not canon. That ain't gonna work for me.
Right.
You got to give me something better than that.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's, before we go any further, any other topics from this episode did you want to hit on before we went into our closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I would say this: Whittle is a new character. I didn't mention it the last time we recorded. I was listening, and I had the closed captioning on, or the subtitles, right? And because I'm like, who is that? Because it wasn't Weechie. We've seen him in some, but yeah. So there's Whittle. I don't know. I got to keep an eye out to see if we see him again. But he was there with Nisa, Wicket, and Tebow. So Whittle. Yeah. There you go. A little trivia.
Whittle. Yeah, I guess he was whittling away, huh?
That's right. Whittle. Perfect name. Ewok in the trees, and forest.
Yep. Yeah, just whittling away.
That's right.
Whittling away again on Endor.
Oh man, we're tired at this.
Oh, it's awesome. Love it. Well, let's go ahead and hit our final thoughts. For like I said earlier, this is my favorite episode of Ewoks to date. It was fun, and it reminded me of the great circus stories. And the one in particular I'm thinking of is a Disney movie called I always get the name wrong, but it was about a kid named Toby. And it was just a tremendous movie. The kid runs away, joins the circus, and is very successful at the circus, but things don't work out, and he ends up homesick and reuniting with his folks when he goes back to his hometown to perform. And it's a great episode. And that was a great movie, and this was a great episode. I love the fact that they tackled the moral of things not always being better if on the other side. Grass isn't always greener. I love that lesson they taught. And they taught it in such a fun but easy to understand way, which is great. And I love the characters. I love the Dulocks and their Batman henchmen. It was just a fun episode altogether. I really enjoyed it. David, how about you, brother? What are your closing thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, as you and I have said throughout this podcast episode, this show, Ewoks, animated show, and other Saturday morning cartoons, they've taught, moral lessons. That's what they did, and they do it in a fun manner. I always think about that skill of being able to teach, moral lessons, or to be educational and be fun, to be entertaining. That's not easy to do. And so it is nice to see this cartoon being able to do that. My daughter and I watched, my daughter Lena and we watched this episode last night. And she asked me if I watched this when it was on TV back in, 85, fall of 85 and 86. And I told her, I was playing high school basketball at that time, and so I spent every Saturday morning in a gym. Me and my teammates would referee games for a thing called Saturday morning basketball for young kids in our community. So we were in the gym 7:30, 8 o'clock, opening it up, and then we were refereeing games till 12 noon at least. And so So didn't see him then. And I told Lena that I wished I would have seen him then. Would have been curious to see, and kind of reminisce what my thoughts would be at that time compared to now as an adult. But I'm enjoying them now. Wish I would have seen them then, but enjoying going over them now with Aaron, and looking forward to covering more of these episodes. So really good episode. Enjoyed it. And again, you can't go wrong with these.
No, you can't. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying these. I have, like I said, I'm watching these for the very first time because I missed out on them too during the 80s being overseas. So, but we want to know what you think of this episode of Vintage Reactions, and particularly the Travelling Jindas. You can, of course, let us know via any of our social media platforms. Of course, that would be Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at SW Reactions, or on Twitter at SW Reactions Pod. Or, of course, you can write us a novel or write us a sentence via email as well. You can do that at show at StarWarsReactions.com. Carabast. So... David, I understand you have a psychology corner for us tonight.
Definitely. And in fact, this is part 2 of my coverage of the topic of psychopathy. Last episode 79, I started covering psychopathy. I just, I don't know, looking at the last episode and looking at psychopathy, I thought, well, let me do 2 things in the last episode. I talked about background related to it, as well as traits that made up a thing called callous unemotional traits. So I spent time going over that background, explaining those unemotional traits. People can go back and listen to that, get through it real quick, and see what I said about that. And really at the end of that particular psychology corner, I said that in next week's episode, that would be tonight, I'll talk about 2 things. One, factors that drive psychopathy, as well as look at some treatments that look to be helpful with psychopathy that's in children. Okay, so we'll do that right now. First part is what drives psychopathy. There's 3 different types of factors that drive psychopathy, or the development of that within people. Those 3 factors are neurobiological factors, biological factors, and environmental factors. So let me give a little bit of background on each of those, just enough to kind of help people understand, make them good psychologists, as we always say in the psychology corner. And then we'll call it a night here once we get this covered. So the first is neurobiological abnormalities. And these include this consistent finding that the amygdala is smaller in people with psychopathy. Now, I've talked about the amygdala before in previous psychology corners. This is a structure within the brain. It's within the limbic system. The limbic brain is the brain stem. It's what a lot of people call the reptilian brain. And it is there, before the thinking cap comes over and finishes developing into the prefrontal cortex there, right? The frontal lobe prefrontal cortex, which is right above your eyes, right behind your eyebrows. Now, what I bring this up, again, the amygdala is down there in that limbic area, and it is smaller in people with psychopathy, as I just mentioned. We also see reduced activity in the amygdala. Okay, and some of the related regions of the brain. And so why is this an issue? Because this is not good. Because the amygdala does a couple things. One, it coordinates our fear response, and it also regulates our social behaviors. Now, there's a lot more research going on to try to tease out maybe exactly how it does regulate our social behaviors, but we do know more about that fear response. I'm going to talk about the fear response in a few minutes, but when people aren't fearful, it's a lot more easy to break rules and to hurt others, okay? So just keep that in mind as we talk about this. So there's one of the consistent neurobiological abnormalities that we see in psychopathy, smaller amygdalas, as well as they are less active. Now, let's move on to biological factors. And in this case, these genetic studies, they've shown that disruptive behavior, as well as those CU, those callous unemotional traits in children, are moderately to highly heritable. Not low heritability, but moderately to highly heritable. So the heritability percentage that we are seeing with these callous unemotional traits, these psychopathic traits, is right around 50%. Okay. Now, maybe another way to think about this is variance. Half of the variance, half of what we see in people with psychopathy is determined by genetics. Okay, instead of it being 25% or less. Now, environment also plays an important role as well. It's not just the genetics, but some of the variance, okay, the other 50% roughly of what we see is due to the environment. Now, I want to go over a study that really highlights this interplay between genetics and environment, or nature and nurture. And this is a study done by Dr. Luke Hyde at the University of Michigan. He's a psychologist, and he looked at 561 adopted children. Okay. And these particular children whose biological mothers reported a greater history in them, the mothers, of severe antisocial behaviors were much more likely than those whose mothers did not report such a history to exhibit callous unemotional traits at 27 months of age. So just over 2 years of age, we're seeing a lot more callous unemotional traits in those kids. Again, major genetic loading. Now, major genetic influence. However, again, the environmental factors are critical here as well. And what this study showed is that the more the adoptive mothers used positive reinforcement at 18 months of age, the less likely those children were to develop callous unemotional traits at 27 months. In addition, Dr. Hyde mentions that highly positive adoptive parents were able to buffer the genetic risks in their children almost entirely. That's huge. They're almost able to cancel out all of that genetic risk, and that's really good news for parents. Okay, now, kind of trailing into or transitioning into the second part of what I wanted to cover tonight is treatments for children. Again, perhaps depending if we have time in the next couple episodes, podcast episodes, and depending on what we want to cover here, I might go over treatments that we see for psychopathy in teens, as well as treatment for psychopathy in adults. But I just wanted to go over the treatment for psychopathy in children here, and then call it a night. So, a couple things to talk about here. All right, when we talk about treatments for children, okay, a couple of points, and I really want to give Dr. Abigail Marsh credit. She's a psychologist and neuroscientist at Georgetown University, and she's really done a lot of research in this area of psychopathy. She mentions when it comes to treatment that there's a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, there's just a lack of providers, and I know this across the country, and this is for any type of disorder, depression, anxiety, etc. However, there's an especially large lack of providers for persons with psychopathy, because a lot of people don't want to treat these people. They don't want to interact with them. Why? Because it's hard to feel compassion for people with these issues. Okay. In addition, it is very hard to treat people who see everyone else as the problem. It's one thing when people come in and they know that they're part of the problem, or they see that they may be the problem and they're willing to change. That's a very different scenario than what a lot of these persons present. Okay. However, the research is showing that a lot of effort and a lot of time can bring about some change. So what this treatment is it's aimed at training parents on how to respond to these types of behaviors, these psychopathic behaviors. What it talks about is that, first and foremost, these parents emphasizing clear, consistent, positive reinforcement. Okay, that's not always easy to do. Hard to do with kids that are even easier to deal with than these kids. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is this. is that as parents, these are for all parents, no matter what kind of issues your kids are having, don't accidentally reinforce bad behaviors. Now, Aaron's a parent, I'm a parent. I've told people this many times. I've inadvertently, accidentally reinforced bad behaviors in my kids. It's we've all done it as parents. I don't know if there's a parent who can say that they haven't, but in these kids in particular, we really can't give any type of reinforcement to tantrums, bad behaviors, etc. Just no good, really no good with these kids. Now, there's another thing to keep in mind, and it's this, is that a lot of these kids who show the callous, unemotional traits, they do not respond very well to punishment, okay? And research is showing that they're just less influenced by threats of punishment, because there's just not much fear in them, right? Like when Aaron and I recorded this first time, I'll bring it up again. My parents were like, and this will date myself, David, we're going to take away your Atari 2600. No, huge,
Yeah.
These to be like, whatever, take it, Fear plays a key role in being able to parent. And unfortunately, a lot of these children, I'll say this, teens and adults are fearless, unfortunately. Okay. Now, and one other point I'd like to make in terms of the treatment, and Dr. Marsh as well as Dr. Hyde talk about this, and some other researchers. A big thing that is helpful in treating these kids is really to show a lot more affection. I don't mean a little bit, a lot more affection, a lot more smiles, and more physical touch, because these children usually have not gotten a lot of affection, and understandably so with how they present. So that is another critical thing to do. One other point I would mention, and I want to note that here in March, I have my Monitor on Psychology. It's one of the journals I get. There's an article in here, brand spanking new this month, called A Broader View of Psychopathy, and it's in here. I mentioned it last week. But just yesterday, March 16th, Speaking of Psychology, it's the flagship podcast for the American Psychological Association. It's about 45 minutes. They do interview Dr. Abigail Marsh, who is in this, one of the psychologists interviewed in this article. And she does a great job of describing all of this in her research on psychopathy. But I wanted to mention that in both those things, please listen to the podcast, Speaking of Psychology, dated yesterday, as well as the brand new Monitor on Psychology, which you can just go to apa.org and search for Monitor. And most of these articles are on there, and you can read them for free. But one other piece of research being done by this Dr. Frick. He's at Florida State University in this. Eva Kamonis. She's a PhD at the University of New South Wales in Australia. They have been doing research with parent-child interaction therapy, and specifically a specific type of it called parent-child interaction CU, which teaches parents how to emphasize positive reinforcement to change a child's behavior, how to be warmer and more responsive, and so on and so forth, and pay attention to other children's emotions. And so that's showing some promising results. So I wanted to mention that those are just some of the treatments. It is a lot. They're working, but they do have limitations, because again, this is a tough crew to bring about change in. But again, tonight I wanted to do two things. Cover what drives psychopathy, and we mentioned those three types of factors, as well as some of the treatments for children that seem to be gaining some traction at this time. So hopefully people have a better understanding of psychopathy from last week and this week. Also, if people have been following us on social media, they'll have seen that, Aaron has it set up where those fortune cookies come out each morning, and the two most recent fortune cookies from a couple episodes of the Clone Wars both discuss evil. And so last week and this week's Psychology Corners really blend nicely with those fortune cookies from the Clone Wars that were just posted here the last couple days. So nice synergy there, Aaron.
Well, we try.
That's right.
We try. We aim to please. Perfect. And of course, David, if somebody wants to question, not necessarily question you like they're grilling you, but if they have questions about the Psychology Corner, whether this one or one in the past, or they just want to talk Star Wars with you, how would somebody go about doing that?
Absolutely. 3 different ways. One is Twitter, and that is at David_Modders with an S on the end there. I've been on there for a long time. The other is Instagram. Just search my name, David Modders. And then, of course, I think Aaron hinted at it. Whether you want a novel, write a novel, more long form, definitely use David at StarWarsReactions.com.
Perfect. Now, of course, if you want to talk Star Wars with me, the perfect place to do that is on Twitter. You can find me there at TA Harris 121079. Or, of course, you can always hit me up via email, Aaron at StarWarsReactions.com. David, my friend, are you ready for this?
You're always ready. I don't know that I'm ready.
That's right. I'm always ready for the dad joke of the week. I need to get a whole theme song built for that. That's just what we need. It would work perfectly. But yeah, it's time for the dad joke of the week. And this time it comes in the form of a question. David, where do the Gungans store their fruit preserves?
I don't know, Aaron. Where do Gungans store their fruit preserves?
They store them in the Jar Jar.
So bad.
Jar Jar. He's a storage device. He keeps stuff fresh.
This is what you get, people, with late night recordings, and we're
Carabast. No, awesome. Love it. David, my friend, this has been fun.
Absolutely, buddy. No, I love recording with you. Yes, again. No, I love recording with you. It's, just talking Star Wars with you, talking psychology with you, the Star Wars dad joke of the week. It's all fun. I hope our listeners are enjoying it. And, I'm so glad we've been able to do 80 episodes.
Same here. We got more to come. Of course, you'll want to join us next week for episode 81. We are bringing back our profile series. I'm so excited for this. We are going to be breaking down the history, the biography, and the makeup of the incredible Agent Kallus from Star Wars Rebels. So, of course, we want you to be a part of that conversation. So make sure you send us your thoughts, whether it be through our social media accounts or email we mentioned earlier. Let us know what your thoughts are on Kallus, a.k.a. #HotKallus, and we will include you in that episode. Well, nothing else to say, but we want to thank you for listening. Y'all are the greatest. Y'all are awesome. We love y'all. We're praying for y'all. We wish y'all the best. Stay healthy, stay safe. And remember, this is your place for elegant discussion for a more civilized age.
If you'd like to share your thoughts, you can email us at show@starwarsreactions.com for our show notes and the latest news from the Star Wars universe. Visit our website at www.starwarsreactions.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at SWReactionsPod or on Facebook at Star Wars Reactions. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on iTunes. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or by Lucasfilm Limited. It's intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, All names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and the respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Star Wars Reactions unless otherwise indicated. Star Wars Reactions, elegant discussion for a more civilized age.